So I'm going to put two links into the chat. The first link is to my handout, and the second link will be to this Google form. It is interactive. If you fill it out and click submit, I will have your responses, and I will actually be able to send them to Dr. Tassel, and she can see everyone who participated through this little short form. So that's very neat. Okay, now I'm going to start my presentation. So let's do that. Okay, I had developing measure concepts was my chapter, specifically focusing on time and money. So first we're going to talk about time misconceptions. If you look on the Google form, it'll ask you, do you remember having any misconceptions about time? Did you ever struggle to read an analog clock? A clock that looks like this. I know some adults who can't read an analog clock, so it's something a lot of people do struggle with. So the biggest misconception when it comes to time is confusion in regards to the minute and hour hands on an analog clock. So this one is representing 10:30, just a little emoji, but students will commonly read the number closest to the hour hand as the hour. So they'll say maybe 10:06 because they see 10 and they see 6. They might not understand the relationship to minutes. A lot can be going on there when they're first starting to tell time. So how can we address these misconceptions? First, we can focus on one unit at a time, be it minutes, hours, or seconds, with a one-handed clock. So this is a figure from our textbook. It shows one-handed clocks. This one's about 7. This one's a little bit past 9 o'clock, and this one's halfway between 2 and 3. So that can help students start to break it down. So they're just focusing on the hour, and then maybe they can talk about skip counting in minutes later on. Another way we can address this misconception is to compare an analog clock and a digital clock so they can see the time on each. So they can see this is 12:45 on an analog clock, and this is 12:45 on a digital clock. So time is different from any other measurement in school because it cannot be seen and it cannot be felt. This difference makes it more difficult for students to understand time and how the units correlate to duration. Ultimately, time can be thought of as the duration of an event from its beginning to end. For students to adequately understand the tribute of time, they need to make comparisons of different durations. So as a teacher, you can have them record daily activities such as how long it takes them to brush their teeth, how long do they eat dinner, how long does it take for them to get to school or do their homework. You can point out these different durations. As students learn about seconds, minutes, and hours, they can develop how long or how short these units actually are. And this practices SMP2, reasoning abstractly and quantitatively. Okay, now we're going to look at classroom time activities with some technology resources. Let's look at our first classroom time activity, which is called Ready for the Bell. In this activity, you give students a clock, the little clock faces on a recording sheet. You secretly set a timer to go off at the hour, half hour, or minute. When the surprise timer rings, students look up at the clock you have in the classroom, and they record what they see on the face in the recording sheet. So here you can have discussions about how time has elapsed. You can talk about how long the time was, how short the time was, and it just helps them think about telling time, but just the relationship between reading the clock. Okay, then obviously we want to teach our students to just be able to read clocks. So because time, like I said earlier, is abstract, can't be seen, can't be felt, learning to tell time has little to do with time measurement and more so actually how to have the skill to actually interpret this instrument. Like you're learning to read a clock more than like the concept of time. So clock reading can be difficult to teach. Starting in first grade, you just want to usually teach clocks or you want to show your students clocks at the hour, half hour, and then in second and third grade, you can talk about 5-minute intervals and 1-minute intervals and do skip counting. Another activity you can do is approximate time with one-handed clocks. I already showed that on the misconceptions page, but it can help younger grades and just anyone struggling to read an analog clock. I forgot one more thing. So when students are reading clocks, instead of pointing at the minute hand and say, oh, it's pointing at 4, transition your language to make it more accurate and say it is about 20 minutes after the hour. Because when you're reading the clock, you want them to focus with precision and know the terms appropriately. And then when you're focusing on solving elapsed time problems, you can do an empty timeline. So you can sketch any timeline. So this one shows 8:40 to 11, and it shows, you know, how 20 minutes is shorter than 2 hours. And you can actually put any increment. So if you wanted to go by 5 minutes on this entire timeline, you could. Excuse me. And this is just a good tool when you're solving elapsed time problems. So now we're going to look at 2 pieces of technology that are found in the text. So the first we're going to look, this is basically they're comparing an analog clock and a digital clock with each other. So let's look at that. This is the website. It's visnos.com. So it shows you the digital clock here and then the analog clock. You can actually click this button that says real time, and that is the time right now. Don't look at the PM part, but that's okay. So this shows you the real time on both. You can pick a 12-hour format or a 24-hour format. You can also turn the digital clock off so they can only read the analog clock. We'll put that back onto 12. And one thing I thought was neat, so if you go onto mode and you click style, so say your students are colorblind, like they can't see red, green or something, you can change the hand colors, and you can also change the clock face color, which, I mean, I thought was neat. So just in case you need to do that. And it's also kind of advanced if you click angles or fractions. You can do some even more like, I guess, upper level math rather than just learning how to tell time. And then you can also click this dice button, and it just gives you a random time. So that's good when you're just generating problems. The second technology resource that I'm going to show you is the National Library of Virtual Manipulatives. So this site is very, very cool. So I'm doing measurement, grades 3 through 5. That's when you primarily learn time. So if you scroll down, you can see there's an interactive set time on digital analog clocks. You can answer questions. The book says to look at this. This asks you what time will it be before or after a given time period. But it just has all measurements. So it also has money, learn about money by counting and making change. But what was really cool about this website, so say you're teaching, it could be measurement, geometry. If you're teaching 10th grade algebra, you can go here and find tools. So I really like this website. Okay, so now let's talk about money. So have you ever had, or do you remember any misconceptions you have about money? The biggest misconception when it comes to money is that the size of the coin determines its value. So students see a dime or a penny, and they think the dime is less because it is smaller. How can we address this misconception? So you can glue coins to linking cubes like this to represent their values, or to a 10 by 10 frame where the penny is glued into the 1 square to show it has a value of 1. Okay, so here's a list of the money ideas that typically are required in the primary grades. So you want to recognize the coins and identify their values. So this is a dime, this is a penny. You want to count and compare sets of coins. You want your students to be doing this. you want them to create equivalent coin collections like seen in this picture. So 3 dimes is equal to 30 pennies. 10 nickels is the same as 5 dimes. 50 pennies is 2 quarters. You also want them to select the appropriate coins for a given amount, to be able to mark change and solve world problems involving money starting in the 2nd grade. This is how we can directly implement that skill set and those values on the last page. Okay, so in the first activity, we want our students to recognize coins and identify their values. So they can learn this through just exposure and repetition. This is a penny, it's worth 1. This is a dime, it's worth 10. You also want them counting sets of coins. So this is just naming the total value of a group of coins, doing mental math. Then you can move on to money skip counting. So money skip counting explains to students that they will start skip counting by 1 number at your signal, and then they'll shift to a different number. So you can do by hundreds, by 50, by 25, by 10, by 5, or for 1, or by 1, which isn't really skip counting, but that's okay. The last money activity we have is a hundreds chart, money count, which is seen here. So you can see where the quarter falls on the hundreds chart, where the nickels fall, which are all the 5s here in the gray, where the dimes fall, which is all the red, and the pennies are all. And 100 pennies, this whole hundreds chart, equals $1. So this can be good to have it in your classroom. It can help students remember, oh look, 1 cent is a penny, a nickel is 5, a dime is 10, a quarter is 25, because it's on to the right. You can download this for free off of Teachers Pay Teachers if you just Google hundreds chart money count. So, okay. Also, if you have any EL students who are recent immigrants or not recent, they could still have the money, invite them to share the coins from their country and see how their coins compare to ours. Okay, now we're going to talk about literature for measurement concepts. So the textbook recommended 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of literature to use in your classroom. So How Big is a Foot is a fun story where a king wants to measure a bed for his queen by using his feet. The carpenter has very small feet who makes the bed, and it just shows how we need standard units because a foot is inaccurate when you're actually using someone's foot. Another tale the book recommended is 12 Snails to 1 Lizard. The third they recommended is Just a Second, which is a beautifully illustrated book that provides fascinating facts about what can happen in a second, a minute, an hour, a day, a month, a year. So an example would be, did you know a bumblebee beats its wings 200 times a second? They can use these facts to explore and discuss math problems. The last book is Inch by Inch, written in the 1960s. The authors link inchworms into building the idea of a length unit. So they kind of show students how rulers can work because rulers measure inch by inch. Awesome. And this is my reference page. All the information and ideas that I've discussed obviously came from our textbook. Yay. And if you still have the Google form up, tell me 1 through 5 if you learned anything from the presentation. I would like to see your answers. Thanks so much.